Welcome to the Living All In podcast. I appreciate you joining for what I hope you find are some thought-provoking discussions of life, leadership, character, perseverance, and living intentionally in every aspect of life. I'm a business owner, executive coach, and a strategist for business and government leaders across the U.S. More than any of that, though, I'm a husband, a friend, an adventurer, and a believer in what others at times say is impossible. A guy who is out to live life to its fullest and who simply doesn't believe in half measures. I hope you find something in each episode that you can apply to your life, that it inspires you to live life with purpose, with intention, and appreciation for the gift of every day, moment, and opportunity. That from the little to the big, the daily grind to the life-changing opportunities, you wake up every day committed to living all in. On the last episode, I shared a bit of my background to hopefully give you some understanding of the things that shape my current view of life. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, today's show should still be able to stand on its own and make good sense, but you might find the thought process and outlook I share today become even more clear if you jump back and listen to that first episode now or sometime in the future. If you're a client, a friend, or somebody who has been following me for a while, you've probably heard me say that I firmly believe we all have two lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one. Today, I want to talk a bit about how I came to have that belief. More than that, what for me it's meant coming to that realization, and the kind of life-changing effect it can have for anybody when you realize that and commit to truly making the most of it, to living in a way that in every aspect of the things you do reflects that truth, honors that gift. Life was a bit of a rocky path for me with its share of twists and turns, as I've shared. Something inside me, at times pure stubbornness, pushed me through some challenges a lot of people around me watched, expecting, maybe even hoping, to be what would either knock me down, back into my place, or at least reduce some of that fire driving me forward. Even the times I arguably should have learned some lessons, more often than not, I didn't. I guess when the risks don't matter to you, the future isn't something you're counting on or expecting to have, it takes a lot to convince you to do anything other than go hard at whatever is in front of you. Then, if that doesn't work, go harder until you break through it. Most of my life, I've led a pretty walled off and solitary existence. That's not to say I didn't have friends. There were a handful of people I stayed connected with or would spend time with, but there were very, very few I trusted. For much of my adult life, that number wasn't zero, but it was pretty damn close. On the professional front, during each chapter of my early career, a lot of my success and effectiveness hinged, at least in part, on trusting no one. From expecting that the person across from me was at worst actively looking to deceive or do harm, and at best was working their own agenda, had their own ulterior motives. So as I saw it and lived it for decades, the only viable path was to never let anybody too close. That attitude, that approach, meant anything they did was just part of the game, if not what should be expected. And it would make anything I needed to do much less personal, if there was no personal to that connection. So call it lone wolf, loner, or whatever you will, it worked for me. It worked for the specific tasks or jobs I needed to get done. It worked to insulate against disappointment or other negative feelings and emotions. It worked for a wandering life with no roots, no deep connections anywhere, or really with anyone. A few years ago, all of that changed. I had met and fallen head over heels with a woman who had turned my entire world upside down. Before that, I'd had relationships and had been in love a couple times. Though, if I'm being honest, of those couple times, the most successful ones had at least 1,000 miles between us most days, or were about romanticizing something that once was, only to have to accept that time and life can change us in very different ways. I was open to and actually drawn to the idea of being in love. But when it came time to doing what that takes, I had a tendency to stop just short of that kind of all-in vulnerability and trust. It wasn't that I'd given up on love. I just accepted and embraced my existence as that guy. You know, the fun uncle with cool stories of the latest adventure to share. The guy friends would describe as a great catch if he'd be more realistic about his expectations. Or the eternal bachelor who gets bored too easily, doesn't give things a real chance. The way I saw it, I just had a very high bar for who I was going to really give my time or heart to. I loved my life, and I wasn't interested in compromising. If it meant staying single, I was honestly fine with that. No, it wasn't my preference, but it didn't keep me up at night either. I remember one year I even tried the whole online dating thing. From Match.com to eHarmony, I met some great people, including a few I'm still blessed to call friends. But either the timing wasn't quite right, the spark just not there, life and professional obligations pulled me away, or I just wasn't really willing to give what it would take. There were also one or two who to me highlighted the entire challenge of dating midlife, and certainly given my past and my life at that time. One in particular I remember wrote and spoke eloquently for weeks about how much she loved my independent spirit, my willingness to walk my own path. And then, after what I thought was a perfectly enjoyable dinner, as I walked her to her door, she turned, kissed me, and said, "I know all those things about you that I said really attracted me to you, and they do, and tonight does even more. But do you think you're ever going to grow up or take life seriously, be responsible, and actually have a normal life?" That was the end of what had been a great date, and the end of not only my online dating, but my active pursuit of somebody to date at all. I was approaching 40, fully accepted. I was past the age at which I'd want to have kids. The thought of being in my 60s at my kids' graduation from high school terrified me. That acceptance was in a lot of ways freeing. Sure, I wanted to love and be loved. I was intrigued by the idea of having a life partner, but that hadn't been what I'd known. I hadn't spent much time thinking about it, much less really seeking it. So not having it didn't seem that big of a loss or a failure or a missed opportunity. I did date a few more incredible women, and honestly, they deserved more than what I was willing or able to give them. Most I've stayed in touch with, and my heart is truly warmed to know they've found somebody who deserves the kind of love they have to offer, who lights their world on fire and for whom they do the same. Then it happened for me. A woman who had been a friend became much more. She was, honestly, all the things I had convinced myself were the deal breakers and the definition of not a match for me. And yet, somehow, she was everything my heart, my soul, my most true self wanted and needed. I'd sworn I was too selfish to want kids I'd have to put ahead of myself, or to ever be with a single mom who would need to and should put her kids first. But seeing her with her kids, seeing them light up when we spent time together, it lit up my world too. I had been equally certain, particularly after a few less than successful experiences as people got to know the full me, that the girl next door, while incredibly attractive in theory, was the absolute opposite of who I could connect with, given the life I'd led, the life that was still a very real part of who I am. But there she was, the adorable, quintessential, beautiful, sweet, truest of hearts girl next door. And I couldn't imagine being with anybody else. And I couldn't imagine not being with her. And I was pretty convinced if I ever found the right girl for me, it would be the magic of the ocean that would connect us. My soul will always belong to the sea. The salt water be where I find peace. On or beneath the waves where I go to ground myself, to rejuvenate, with the open water always beckoning me to play. But there she was, raised in Texas. After immigrating from the UK through Canada, she'd moved to Colorado as soon as she could to be in her happy place. She's a mountain girl whose heart is alive beneath the rustling pines, sipping wine by the roaring campfire. And I couldn't imagine not being with her. Now, I'm not going to get into my personal politics on this show or on the podcast in general, but I will share that fundamentally, I am a radical moderate with a libertarian streak, a true believer in the value of hard work, of compassion and equality, with a deep love and commitment to my country, who thinks both parties have lost their damn minds and sight of the people they're supposed to serve. I bring this up today only because, despite what some would say has been my pattern of being drawn to the bohemian free spirit, the borderline hippie who talks of world peace and the latest music festival, I'd sworn that was exactly who I couldn't be with long term. And yet, here she was, in front of me. The girl who spent younger years listening to the Dead, who wore her heart on her sleeve, who wanted to be part of every do-good cause she could find and still believed in the fundamental goodness of people and the ability to change the world through good acts and thoughts. And there I was, completely, totally, undeniably head over heels in love with her. Somehow, two lives that couldn't seem more different became one. As she said, she gives me roots and I give her wings. For the first time in my life, I was with somebody who would challenge my way of thinking in ways that forced me to grow, to be better. I was with somebody, at risk of just resorting to cheesy moving lines, I was with somebody who made me want to be a better man. I was with somebody I trusted, more than I trusted anybody in decades. I was, for the first time in my life, with somebody who made me actually think about the future. She made me want to make plans for the future. I was with somebody who made the future matter, made me care if I had one. That was weird for me. It was a totally new way of thinking, to find myself actually considering consequences of my actions, or the risks and implications of things I do, and to care. Now, don't jump to too many conclusions. I wasn't going to change who I am inside, but I was thinking about things differently. I was caring about things in different ways. I still did the things that lit me on fire. Some she embraced, some she tolerated. I was living a life I honestly couldn't have imagined, with somebody I still didn't believe I deserved or would put up with me and my way of living. But she did, and we made an amazing life together. The guy who never saw himself with kids found myself battling most of how I was hardwired to find ways to connect with kids who truly made me want to be better and make the world a better place for them. The guy who had only ever lived in the moment found himself equally caring as much about a future as embracing each day. For the first time, the future mattered. For everything my partner and I would do with that future, for the world our kids would have and the moments we'd have with them, the future mattered, which was both bizarre to me and absolutely fantastic in ways I just don't have the words to articulate. Then, a few years ago, a curveball came that would finally wake me up in ways nothing else had been able to until then. I was always physically active growing up and as a young adult. From swimming and cycling and playing lacrosse all through college to working as a beach lifeguard, competitive kickboxing as a young adult, and the physical demands of the first few chapters of my professional life. By my 40s, I'd let a lot of that go. I'd occasionally go on some intense bouts of getting in shape, but then a job or assignment would distract me, would give me excuses. At 47, I was the heaviest I'd been, 190 pounds, 5'8", and it was not a healthy 190 pounds. I saw 50 around the corner, and I wanted to make a change. So I started eating healthy again. Went from walking a mile a day to running a few miles every day. Back to kickboxing 3-4 days a week. I was eating clean with a diet dominated by protein smoothies and giant salads with chicken or steak sliced on them. 5 months into this new regimen, I dropped 20 pounds. I was feeling great. And then one morning I felt a little off, like a stomach bug. Bit of a warning. The next section of this story aren't for the faint of heart, and they are not mealtime listening, just in case you want to ready yourself or pause until a better time. The stomach bug I thought I had turned to nonstop diarrhea. I told myself again it was just a stomach bug, and I didn't otherwise feel sick, so I kept working out. I doubled down on the clean eating, fresh pressed juices of all kinds, protein and frozen fruit smoothies, salads for lunch, salads for dinner. It didn't help. The runny output turned bloody. It felt like a ball of broken glass was being dragged through my lower digestive system all day. I started losing weight. Not the way I had been doing or the way I would want to do. Rapid, daily weight loss. To offset that, I tried to eat more, eat cleaner. That led to more blood, more pain, more rushing to the bathroom every hour. At that time, my girlfriend was out of town for a week, and I didn't exactly share with her what was going on. In fact, I did the worst thing you could do. I Googled my symptoms, which led me to conclude I either had a simple irritable bowel syndrome that I concluded would be resolved by eating a lot of yogurt, or I had late-stage colon cancer. I called a few specialists, and nobody could see me for at least a few months. So I decided to self-treat with yogurt and a very bland diet. None of that worked. When my girlfriend got back to town, and after being away, found a partner with very limited romantic interest, she was understandably hurt. I told her I just have a stomach bug and need a few days. Her oldest child, our daughter, was graduating in 2 weeks. Her grandma was flying up from Texas, and everybody was focused on that celebration. I was not about to derail or be the downer, so I just kept things to myself. I stopped being able to sleep for more than an hour at a time. Pain and the urgent need to go to the bathroom had me afraid to lie down or be too far from the nearest bathroom. I settled in on a recliner in the living room where I would exist for the next few weeks. Eating caused too much pain. Any fluids ran right through me. Not eating, not drinking, made me weak, dehydrated. I existed on chicken broth, an occasional cracker, or a few bits of rice and Gatorade. I made it to our daughter's graduation somehow. Mostly out of pure determination and an unwillingness to say what was going on, as well as a stubborn need not to let it be known how weak I'd become. The meal after her graduation was pizza and salad, two of my favorite things when I was indulging, and I couldn't even imagine having a single bite of either. I quietly left and went home to my recliner. It was getting bad. I was starting to question if there was a when I get to the other side of this sickness. But all my life, I'd survived. I was convinced I would this time too. My girlfriend started calling around to get me in to see a gastrointestinal specialist. Most were giving her the same answer I'd been given: 3, 4, maybe 5 months out before they could see me. Then one day, like a miracle worker, my own personal angels, Carrie conspired with a medical assistant in a specialist's office to squeeze me in to be seen. After a scope of my GI system, I was diagnosed with either ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Having absolutely no idea what either of those were, I looked at the doctor and just asked, "So, what do I need to take? When can I get back to working out? And when can I get back to skydiving?" Other than him literally laughing at me and in separate conversations telling Carrie he'll just have to wait until we can get him approved for treatment, I can't say I remember much about that doctor or our interactions with him. By that point, the fatigue and my decline had me living in a fog most of the time. The only option the doctor offered was infusion of a specialty medication that required a complicated pre-approval or admitting me to a hospital if I got any worse. By now, Carrie had moved into the living room with me. She brought a mattress, spent her days and nights being there with me, watching TV all night and on the phone with the insurance company and different treatment centers all day. They kept telling her, "Try us back tomorrow or the next day, maybe in another week." One night, the pain just got to be so much. The state of my physical deterioration so severe that I couldn't sleep at all. For 72 hours, I didn't sleep. Not a single second. Death came to the room. We talked for 3 straight days, me and death. We didn't argue, didn't bargain. It wasn't a negotiation. We both just acknowledged what was happening. Although I had faced death once before, this time was totally different. The first time was quite literally in a flash. No time to think about it, to wonder, to have any real thoughts about it. There was time for that after the fact, but it was at a point in my life that not only did I think I was invincible, I didn't care much whether I made it or not. I didn't think I would have made it as far as I did, considered any day alive a bonus day, and didn't have any thoughts or plans for tomorrow, much less for the future. But this time, at 47 years old, with an amazing girlfriend, 2 kids, and a future waiting, I had a much different mindset. I didn't try to argue with death. I didn't get angry. I didn't try to strike a deal. Maybe because I was so weak and was withering away, but largely because I just decided, no, not yet, not now. She and I still have so much left to do together. By that point, I'd faded into something that truly frightened me when I looked in the mirror. After having slimmed intentionally from 190 pounds to 170 over 5 months, in less than a month, I dropped to 120 pounds. Every bone in my rib cage, in my face, in my chest showed through. I will never forget the pain in her eyes when I turned to Carrie and said, I don't have much time left. Without major medical intervention, I'm not going to make it. She wasn't having it. She immediately called the specialist I'd seen and the hospital where the surgeon he'd spoken of was based. The specialist was pretty dismissive, telling her, well, if he's complaining that much, just take him to a hospital. Carrie somehow convinced the infusion center at the hospital to book me for treatment, even while they awaited insurance approval. When the nurse tried to get the IV in me, my veins were too constricted. My body too dehydrated for that line to even go in. While she put a smaller gauge needle in to just get me stabilized enough for the infusion, she also called upstairs and had me emergency admitted to the hospital. 6 hours later, I'd had my first infusion of Remicade and was being wheeled into a room in the med-surg unit at Rose Medical Center, where I'd spend the next 3 weeks as doctors first tried to push the disease that was attacking me from inside into remission, and when that became a losing battle, to stabilize me enough to be able to survive surgery. After treating me during those 3 weeks in the hospital, I was sent home to, in the surgeon's words, be comfortable and hopefully gain at least a few pounds so I could survive what would be pretty invasive surgery that would change my life in ways I didn't even comprehend. During the 10 days at home, I remember a business opportunity came up that required me meeting with a government official. I was too weak to drive, too small to fit in any of my clothes, so I quickly ordered a pair of jeans in a size I don't think I'd worn since I was 12 or 13. I was too weak to even walk, so Carrie drove me to the meeting, walked me upstairs into the office. And I can still hear that client's words when I walked into her office. You've looked better, Barrick. Years later, she would joke with me that she didn't know somebody could be that shade of gray and still be alive. I'll do a future show about the medical journey, the serious challenges that included such high doses of prednisone that not only did I have the charming personality effects of those steroids and the insatiable appetite from it, I'd also grow a giant hole in my jaw. I'd lose all of my teeth and have such severe allergic reaction to Remicade that doctors for months thought I developed what they called drug-induced MS. So they pulled all of my treatments and kept me alive again with high-dose prednisone, which ate away at my mind and my bones. Since then, there have been more than 20 surgeries, most to treat the damage done by Crohn's, some to rebuild different parts of me, and a few due to a misdiagnosis that led to an arterial stent being placed in an artery that we later learned was unnecessary. Another surgery to treat a blockage that stent caused, and yet a third to save my leg when the clearing of the first blockage caused another that had surgeons telling my girlfriend a few hours into surgery that if they didn't get it cleared in the next 30 minutes, they'd be amputating my leg. Fortunately, that last resort did not come to be needed. It has been a roller coaster. It still is a roller coaster. But my doctors saved me. My surgeon said my large intestine fell apart in his hands as he took it out. Another 24 or even 12 hours, and it would have fully ruptured, leaving me septic and my survival in question. For the next 3 months, I lived with an ostomy, the end of my small intestine sticking out my stomach wall into a bag that collected my waste. I found myself in a completely foreign world. I struggled to care for myself. We named that little nub that stuck out in the system I had inside Stitch. He was often ornery, but he meant well and was trying to help me. Not only did Carrie stand by my side through everything, she leaned into it and into our love. Stitch revolting and spewing crap, literally, while trying to change the bags, she'd be there to laugh or cry with me, to help clean up the mess. Stitch letting me know quite loudly and explosively what he thought of different meals. She read every book and article to learn more about our options. Stitch just being Stitch and my body having an entirely new existence. Carrie gave me the room to curl up in bed with my dogs and cry, the space to stubbornly insist I was going to come back stronger than ever, and she gave me the constant assurance that she was there by my side. I was one surgery into what would be a 3-surgery process to rebuild my digestive system with no large intestine anymore. The first step was living with that ostomy to give my body a chance to heal. During the second surgery, they would build something called a J-pouch out of a piece of my small intestine inside my body that would do part of the job of a large intestine. But it would need to heal internally, so it wouldn't be connected until the third surgery. A lot of people started telling me all of the things I couldn't do, the things I shouldn't do. A note here. I am truly grateful for the people I've connected with on social media, but I am equally grateful I didn't find some of them or some of the groups while I was at my lowest. Those online support communities are great, but you have to get through 95% of the people who are there because things are not going well in order for you to find the 5% of the people who are there to share stories of hope, of success, of encouragement. While in the hospital, we'd found a new specialist when he happened to check on me while doing rounds. To this day, he is my go-to doctor and has become a personal friend. While so many were telling me I couldn't, I shouldn't, I wouldn't be able to, Doc Miller would say, I think you're a little nuts, but if you're going to, here's what we need to do. I was ready. I needed to start living again, to be active again, to start working out again. I needed to walk, to run. I also needed to get back in the air skydiving, and I needed to be back in the ocean to play. At the intersection of these, my medical reality and my internal needs, was born a new outlook on life. They kept me in the hospital for another week after that first surgery so I could gain the strength to walk down the hall, rebuild enough muscle just to care for myself. It took me the first week after I went home to even be able to walk up the street and back, or to be able to go up half of a flight of stairs. But I was determined. I was stubborn. I got on the treadmill. I started with a half-mile walk. Then, every single day, it went up a half mile. By week 2, it was a jog, and I had a note taped on the screen that said, "Second chance, first place." I told my doctors that by the end of the year, I was going to run a 5K. Most of the team shared their doubts. My home nurse fired me when she came over and found me doing, let's just say, a little more than the PT sheet prescribed. Doc Miller never questioned it. I was also ready to get back in the sky after months on the ground. Doc was insistent that I at least let the surgery heal for 6 weeks. In the meantime, I found a specialty company that made neoprene belts to hold that ostomy bag in place, and they made another one that could be used in the water. 6 weeks to the day after that surgery to save my life, surrounded by people I am so blessed to call friends, I made my 500th skydive. And the next morning, I played in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. I was reclaiming my life. More than reclaiming it, though, I was determined to take living life to a whole new level. From the way I loved and played to the way I worked, the way I lived each day. I didn't have the words for it yet, but in time they would come to be clear. I was committed to living all in. On the next episode, which will drop later this week, we'll get to what that means, what it looks like for me to live all in. I'll share how it has changed nearly every aspect of my life, how I approach each day, the people in my life, the work I do, and what I do with my time. In that next episode, I'll share a bit about how it's shifted what I value in my own life, in the people I choose to spend time with, what gets my time or energy, and how I assess if something or somebody is worth that time or energy. That will also be the start of the conversations I'm particularly excited about having with guests and with all of you listening or viewing this podcast about the traits and habits I believe are most important to happiness and to success in all aspects of life. My hope is that each episode and story will inspire every listener or viewer to take action in your own life. With that goal and commitment in mind, on the next episode, I'm not just going to talk about what the realization that we have only one life meant for how I've lived. I'm going to share some of the tools I use to sort through the noise, to figure out what things do really matter and are worthy of time, to hold myself accountable for taking daily action on building the life I want and the life that reflects that recognition of the gift of each day. Hopefully, some of those tools will be things you can use in your own way to get clear on what matters to you, to develop your own plan that reflects those values, to set standards, goals, objectives, and to hold yourself accountable. Thank you for listening today. I know it's time out of your day that could be spent on any one of a dozen other tasks or hundreds of other podcasts. I'm honored you took the time to listen, and I hope you found something you can use or that gave you food for thought. Before you sign off, please do subscribe or follow so you don't miss any upcoming episodes and you get alerts right when they're released. If you're on social media, give the show a follow at Living All In on Instagram and Living All In Podcast on Facebook. You can also follow me directly at Barrick Abramson on Insta and Facebook. I'd love your feedback, your reviews, and help getting word out about the show. You can leave your review on the podcasting network where you're listening, and I'd be truly appreciative of any help sharing links to the show on social media. You can drop me a message directly on any of the socials I mentioned, and I love your thoughts about the show, ideas for future shows and conversations, or guests. Thank you for giving the show a listen. As you go about your daily life, I'd encourage you to do your own internal assessment. Is this something I want to prioritize or make time for? Is this something I have to do? Is this one of those things I really should be doing all in? Am I? Until next time, live with purpose, live with intention, and live all in.